Ahoy folks, and welcome to another Game Explained discussion. I'm your host Tris, and I'm joined by my good friend Shane of ShaneBrained, who also runs Warriors Dojo, to have an in-depth discussion on Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity. Naturally, there will be spoilers in this video. So, Shane, I know you're working on a review of the game for your own channel, but why don't we start with a preview of what your overall thoughts on the game as a whole are, since everyone here knows how much I love this title.
For people unfamiliar with me, I've been covering the Warriors series for a long time and mainly got my start around Hyrule Warriors 1, but I've been playing it for even longer than that. So I was following it since Hyrule Warriors very closely, going on to Fire Emblem Warriors, and to me that was kind of the successor to Hyrule Warriors across all its iterations. And now we've finally gotten here. There's a couple other Warriors games that kind of contribute to the design that I've seen in Age of Calamity. Then it's had a lot of improvements on the formula, but it's also changed a lot of things too. When I first got it in my hands, I was extremely positive on it, and I do really like it a lot. But there are some criticisms coming out lately, which I think are valid, although to me, they don't affect my enjoyment of it all that much.
Right.
And that's mainly has to do with the strategic depth of it. For example, you don't really have to worry about any of your keeps falling. There is sometimes a danger of that, but it's not really the same kind of issue that it was in the past, where, I don't know about you, but I would lose maps on occasion just from my clumsiness or not looking at the notifications. That never happened to me once in this game.
Yeah, I think in the original, I know it ran the issue of if you're going too fast, you'll start getting notifications stacked, so they'll start showing up late. So I had times where someone was in danger, and it wouldn't tell me until they basically were already fleeing. But I didn't have that in this at all.
Yeah, if you go back to Hyrule Warriors when it released on the Wii U, if you remember, you could only control one character at a time, which seems crazy now. And so that would lead to an issue where, you're off fighting in one corner of the map, and then suddenly a critical base is going to fall, or your commander's going to fall, and you have to run all the way back, and it's like a 2.5 minute run, and sometimes you won't make it in time. Adding in the character switching so you could be in multiple places at once, which came with the 3DS port Legends, really fixed that a lot. And basically, Age of Calamity does away with that. It kind of nominally pretends you need to protect this base. But there's really only a couple fights in the game that really had me worried about that. But if that's super important to you, I understand people having that criticism. But to me, the level of depth in each individual moveset is just so much bigger, and allows for a lot more interesting fight setups, and just how you're controlling your character requires so much more thought. And when you suddenly realize what you can do with someone, it kind of blows your mind a little bit. I was thinking about okay, I'm playing as Link. Let's say I'm just using one-hand sword Link, and I'm hitting the Hinox, and so I get his weak point down, so obviously I'm going to stasis him and hit him a whole bunch, and then when the stasis runs out, maybe I'll get a weak point smash. By this time, my stasis is available again, but I don't want to wait for a special attack, so I'm going to backflip, go into his arrow, slow motion because he's midair during backflip, hit the Hinox in the eye so it has his weak point appear for just a second, enough time for me to run up, stasis him again, and possibly break his weak point again. Compare that to fighting King Dodongo in Hyrule Warriors 1, where you just kind of wait. One thing that I never made, consider I made just about every kind of guide that I thought about in Hyrule Warriors 1, was optimal ways to fight the bosses, because in Hyrule Warriors 1, the bosses had certain behaviors based on how close you were to them. You never want to attack a boss in Hyrule Warriors 1 because he'll just put up his guard and go through some other canned reaction.
Yep.
And I remember with King Dodongo, you want to imagine that you've got a Link laying on the ground, and you stack that Link about 3 times, and that's the distance you want to be from King Dodongo, because that is the range where he's most likely to do his suck-in air attack so you can throw the bombs.
And that's most likely.
Yeah, most likely. Sometimes he'll just wander around doing nothing.
Yeah.
And I remember I always wanted to record all of the different ways that I would approach each boss. There are certain timings, like when you can hit Manhandla, so that you, with the boomerang, so that you hit more than one head off at a time. It was just kind of the game of waiting. People criticize say, Ocarina of Time, because every fight is about waiting. And Hyrule Warriors 1 was true to that.
Yeah, it really was. There were very few bosses that weren't that way, but there are also a lot of glitches with the bosses, like that handler randomly losing all its heads for a second.
Yeah, to be clear, I love Hyrule Warriors 1, but I do think its boss design was its weakest part. If I remember, Phantom Ganon was one of the better bosses because you could actively fight him, you weren't just waiting all the time. And of course, there was a big glitch with him where if you hit him with a bomb, it would blow up enough to hit his back and bring him down. Age of Calamity, you can just fight the bosses and do all that stuff to a Hinox, and it just feels so very different. Clearly, the game picked up a lot of cues from Breath of the Wild. In many ways, Breath of the Wild's one-on-one combat is more complex than that. Like, I've seen clips that it looks like it's straight out of, I don't know, like One Punch Man, or like the amount of crazy choreography going on. I don't know if you ever saw the video that was bouncing around Twitter where it was like a 50-second clip of someone just absolutely owning a Lionel. Like, it had no chance. He was like riding the wind and doing all this crazy stuff.
I don't know about the Lionel one, but I've seen the one where they turn like the Guardian battle into like an anime fight. By using a ton of like cryonis and launching everything up into the air.
It was a Guardian, yeah, you're right. I remember because they launched it into the air like that. Like, you obviously can't do that kind of stuff, but because you're fighting like more enemies, and that's kind of like the Warriors classic where you have the chaff in the way, but you're really looking for the large names in the crowd.
Yeah.
Or the ones with health bars, unless you turn them on for every enemy. And just the level of complexity that's been introduced here, importantly, not just for Link, but for many, many of these characters, is super impressive. So the strategic depth is down, but the amount of control and the amount of options that you have in battle is totally unprecedented for a Warriors game. Well, I should say it's almost unprecedented for a Warriors game because, unfortunately, probably not a lot of people have gotten to play it, but I played it because I'm living in Japan right now. So when Persona 5 Scramble came out, I picked that up, and that is the precursor to Age of Calamity, actually. It's another one of the missing links that people might not realize that are there between Hyrule Warriors 1 and Age of Calamity. And that game's crazy. The depth in that combat's incredible.
I really do love when these titles build upon the typical Warriors kind of combat gameplay, because I think when you have that as your base, there's a lot you can do, and I think as long as you don't leave it at the base, because I know the original Hyrule Warriors was closer to that base, which is why a lot of people were on the original Hyrule Warriors in comparison, but so many Zelda fans are getting into Age of Calamity because of how much it builds upon that, brings in Breath of the Wild mechanics, and I think you touched upon a good point too with the strategic value, because sure, with Age of Calamity, you're not really dealing with taking out keeps necessarily, or outposts as they're called in this, and defending them. You'll find many maps maybe have like 4 at most.
Right, and you can just run right through them. Like, some of them, who cares? Like, don't even waste my time. There's better fights elsewhere.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's really interesting that the focus isn't on the keeps, because with the original, majority of the focus really was on the outpost and turning the tide of battle based on who controlled how many. Yeah. And that, while that isn't present here, the strategic values is still there with what your best options against which enemies are. And I think that's really interesting.
Oh yeah. I think kind of a testament to that, where it's bringing in more people from Breath of the Wild, whereas Hyrule Warriors 1 probably has less appeal, is actually my wife, who's been playing a lot of Breath of the Wild lately. Okay. And as soon as she heard about Age of Calamity, she was super interested in playing it. She's kind of nominally played some Warriors games with me in the past, just not as into them as I am, but she, I just finished my 100% run through of Age of Calamity, and it's been nice for her because now she gets to play it, and now she's like, almost at the end of chapter 7, like really, really is enjoying it so far. And I think that's because she liked Breath of the Wild so much, and it's a much easier translation of the mechanics. It's rather than you're in this kind of fort capturing, not simulator, but it doesn't have such a big emphasis on that. It's just Breath of the Wild combat, kind of not supercharged but expanded. literally, with lots more enemies and a lot more variety with who you're controlling and things like that.
Yeah, it's instead of basically being your cookie cutter Warriors game, it really is like a good blend of Warriors and Breath of the Wild, because you see enough of both in terms of mechanics, not just
you take Hyrule Warriors. Okay, so it's a mixture of Warriors and Zelda, but it's like 90% Warriors.
Yeah.
And Breath of the Wild, I don't want to say it's like it has not gone the other way by far, but it's like 75% Warriors. The Zelda, the actual feel of the game which it's pulling from has been bumped up a whole lot, more, where it's a lot more palpable and appeals in that same way. Even down to the menus, like you see the weapon menu, and it's taken straight out of that. It's not building its own world. It's kind of adapting a world that already has an audience, and so it's definitely going to. I don't know if that makes sense. Obviously, Hyrule Warriors 1 was bringing things in from multiple games, but, it had to create its own Hyrule, its own alternate Zelda timeline to add into the multiple alternate Zelda timelines. And so it doesn't have that much of that direct of an appeal, even though obviously it was a great game and a lot of us enjoyed it.
And have put in way too many sets of hundreds of hours into it.
Oh, yeah. Across 3 versions.
Yeah, really?
I did like 100 hours in the Wii U release. Probably 250 something? 300 in the 3DS release. Obviously, I played that one to death. And then when Definitive Edition came out, I had the big Road to 100% streams that I did for like 18 weeks straight, something like that. Yeah, but I did hit that, and so...
That is a lot, but I think that's also a good testament.
It has me a bit sad. I've seen a lot of people reaching 100% around this time, the people that are really into the game, and all of them were like, well, I've hit 100%. I guess I'll play Hyrule Warriors 1 now. Because that game just never stops with the content. Obviously, a lot of it is overly bloated. Speaking as someone who finished all of those adventure modes, I think I am able to say that without...
I think it's a tough comparison, though, because Hyrule Warriors Definitive Edition is the culmination of, like, 4 years of added content to that game.
Obviously.
Whereas Age of Calamity, in my opinion, Age of Calamity is about on par with what the original Wii U release had, not counting its DLC.
Yeah, I totally agree. Well, I somewhat agree, because the most bloated parts of Hyrule Warriors 1 were the first 2 adventure maps. After that, they got a lot better, especially the adventure mode maps that they introduced with the 3DS DLC.
Yeah.
Like the Wind Waker one was all right, but some of those like moved so quick and were really entertaining. I liked the Link Between Worlds one a lot. Oh, the Link's Awakening one was probably my favorite one.
Those were all really solid, honestly. And I do agree that the Legends DLC ones kind of built upon it. I think in general, everything added to the original Hyrule Warriors as of Legends felt... As weird as it sounds, everything added as of Legends feels better than the original version of it. The characters feel like they have a lot more depth to them. The bosses were more interesting. I say bosses is one boss with Phantom Cannon. The maps were neat, and then the actual adventure mode maps also had even more creativity to them.
Yeah, it was a lot of quality, and I'm glad that the Definitive Edition came out so people could experience just how good it was.
Exactly.
If they got that far. That's a lot of hours into that game to reach that stuff.
That is. After I put in way too much for Legends, I've been slowly working my way through Definitive Edition. Because it's like, okay, I got like 99% of the way through Legends. I was only missing like 10 heart pieces total. I think I can slowly work my way through Definitive Edition. No rush this time.
Yeah, I think how they've... So we're talking about Age of Calamity has about the same amount of content as Hyrule Warriors on release. I think it probably does. It's just that it takes less time.
Yeah. It's
because,
broken up differently.
Like, say, for example, finding all the Korok seeds, which takes time, a bit, but compare that to getting all the Skulltulas in Hyrule Warriors 1, even just the ones that came with the release, across the adventure mode maps. Remember some of those, the story mode ones were crazy, and some of the ones in the adventure mode map, you had to play the map twice with specific characters, and... yeah, there's a lot less, speaking of which, I just popped up, there's a lot less character-specific requirements in Age of Calamity. You can generally play whoever you want without worrying about, you're going to suddenly come up on this map a very, very difficult map, and you have to use freaking Ruto or something like that.
Speaking of, and I guess this is a good transition into characters. I believe you tweeted as you were playing through the game. I believe you tweeted that Mifa felt like an apology for Ruto.
Yes.
Would you like to elaborate on character thoughts a bit, starting with Mifa?
Sure.
That's a good starting point.
Sure. So spoilers are no problem. So I guess we're gonna go through the cast, because there's a lot of influences in this cast. So I was thinking about Mifa recently, and I thought about actually Ruto's victory animation. Do you remember what she would do in Hyrule Warriors 1?
Yeah, she would meet like a little fountain and then dive into it, basically.
Exactly. She'd dive back and then pop out of the one, and that's basically Mifa's playstyle. Like, they made that part of the moveset. They probably look like, why didn't we just make Ruto do that? Why did we make her a wave sniper? So Mifa takes kind of the aesthetics of Ruto, obviously, water, Zora-based powers, and then adds in Ganondorf's trident from Hyrule Warriors 1, and the combination of those is so brilliant. Like, I wish Ruto had gotten a trident or something, because it's nuts how fast. Mifa is probably is she the fastest character in the game?
I think Impa might be faster.
Impa,
or at least for some of her moves.
Mifa can just go, whereas Impa does have to stop and kind of re-up her seals. Once you know how to get them back really quickly, it doesn't take that much time.
That is true.
But Mifa feels really fast. Not like literally running across the field. Riju wins the battle on that. But if, for example, to compare Mifa real quick to Ganondorf's trident, when Mifa is in the air, you can do your 3 normal attacks, and then you end with the big dive forward coming out of it. That kind of diagonal down dive, which is basically Ganondorf's trident's big move that he had last time. Just how quick she swinging, the swing speed feels about the same there. But adding in that kind of teleport that she can do to her own water, it doesn't really make much sense early on in the game. But once you get in it a little bit and you realize that it works with all of her new combos that you're getting, like the big whirlpool spinning upwards water tornado? What's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, when you can teleport into that and you start putting things like increased mid-air damage on Mifa's weapon, she can be really, really super deadly. And she was one of the characters that very, very quickly appealed to me. And I think she's obviously going to appeal to a lot of people, partly because of her moveset being so fun. It's a little bit of a learning curve. Not one of the easier characters, but definitely in the middle for me.
It's shocking how good she is, despite being the healer.
Yeah, and I was going to say, she heals herself, which is really helpful in some of those late game challenges where you just can't bring any healing in, or no healing will drop. There's a lot of those late game. I know, because I was doing that Siege of Fort Hateno mission over and over and over again to get to level 100. Yeah. Took a couple times. Yeah. That's basically what I was doing on my Sunday. Saturday? Sunday.
Out of curiosity, because I know Mifa's heal, like the little water spouts and the special attack when you use it with greater range, I know that can heal NPC allies, but can it heal your playable character allies? I haven't been able to tell. I feel like it does, but I also feel like I might just be imagining it.
I was about to say, I don't think I've noticed it, but I did notice it. I brought, during one of those Fort Hateno battles, I brought Calamity Ganon in with me, and he was really low on health. And I intentionally had Mifa do a bunch of attacks, but I definitely put a special attack in there as well. And then Calamity Ganon was back at 75% health, so...
Okay, so that definitely does heal then.
Not definitely. I'll need to do more testing, but I'm pretty certain. Because I can't imagine any other way that Calamity Ganon got his health back. I wasn't controlling him, so he wasn't doing any damage. Oh, actually, thinking that's one thing that that I was disappointed at with when you're not controlling an ally, they kind of just stand around. It's like that has to be some kind of Hyrule Warriors tradition, because that wasn't the case in Fire Emblem Warriors. I remember.
No, they were really useful in Fire Emblem Warriors.
They were super aggressive. You'd send them to a fort, and they're like, "All right, fort's taken. What's next?"
At the same time, though, I am really glad that if someone goes down to a quarter of a heart, their AI can't get them killed.
Yeah, it kind of makes it a little bit too easy in certain ways, because my wife was watching me play, and I think something like that happened. Link was down to 2 hearts, and I was about to get hit by a guardian or something. And I was like, whoop, pressing down real quick as soon as I can. And she was surprised, like, oh, he's not going to die? Like, no, he'll be fine. I literally know 100% he's safe. The only challenge now is to not switch back to Link and accidentally run into something.
Yep. I've had that too many times where I'll swap back to the character at like a quarter heart thinking, I have an apple now so I can heal them. And then they get poked by like a Lizalfos right next to them.
Yeah, or those Lizalfos are some of the most dangerous stuff. When they start breathing fire or doing that lightning, it's a nightmare.
Especially in later levels when they where they like definitely scripted to group up on that. Oh my gosh, you can lose so many hearts to those.
Yeah, especially some of those later hair width challenge ones, which I think they're just trolling you. Because I remember entering those, I'm like, I wonder if they're going to put some Octoroks in there, and yep, sure enough.
Oh gosh, this is so difficult.
Yeah.
So to go back to characters a bit.
Yeah.
Do you want to go through? Because I think it'd be fun to talk about actually like the mechanics of each character. I know we just talked about Mipha, but do we want to go through the character list in order, or do you want to highlight anyone specific first?
I think in order is fine.
Okay.
Yeah, because like you start off with the early characters, and they're typically a lot more simple. So Link, I'll just start with Link with his one-hand sword. One thing I have to say is that I really appreciate that the Master Sword isn't just always the best choice. Its maximum damage is high, but you can get a different one-hand weapon that's going to be a lot more powerful in it. I think by about 40 strength more. The Master Sword's going to max out at about 130, and you can get about 160 plus a bunch of other benefits on another weapon.
Which is crazy.
Yeah. So the one-handed sword style is pretty simple. I like all his shield sliding moves. Those are kind of fun, and they've made it a lot more about holding onto the heavy attack button at the end of your combos to add in some kind of extra attack. That was in there with his Hyrule Warriors 1 moveset. It just wasn't really like in the menu. Like they didn't really tell you all the ways that you could do that. Hyrule Warriors 1 Link was oddly... He had a lot of little hidden bits to his attacks. For example, he had a different standard attack if you had dodged to the left or right, or you'd done a backflip. For some reason...
That is true.
It
true.
doesn't tell you anywhere. Yeah, it doesn't tell you it anywhere, but if you backflipped or dodged to the side, he'd have a different attack after doing that.
That's something they definitely should have included in like the little hints, which I'm glad they did more of in this game with the little details about characters. But anyway.
Yeah. So they've kind of taken that feature and told you that that's what you can do. So that's kind of what he's more about. So he's pretty standard, easy to use. However, when we go to his two-handed weapon style, what I'm curious, real quick, what are your basic thoughts on the two-handed style?
It definitely feels like a fun, silly moveset, and it's actually rather powerful, but I didn't find myself using it too much, because, especially in later levels, the risk doesn't feel worth it with how much you can get hit.
Yeah, I'll just say that the two-handed Link style might be my favorite one of these movesets in the game.
Okay.
I absolutely love it. I love the idea of taking on a risk, because almost every mission, I'm always eating that rotten food that gives you double rupees and lowers your amount of health.
Gotcha.
Like that's an easy trade-off for me, because I don't get hit too often unless I'm running into a wall of flamethrower Lizalfos. Then I get hit a lot. So it's kind of it's rewarding. It has a high skill ceiling. Jeez. It has a very high skill ceiling. There we go. And so it allows you to kind of test yourself and make bargains, and sometimes it pays off. You'll do tons of damage with one of those crazy extended combos through a certain method. I think it's either his 4th or his 5th heavy attack. He jumps into the air, and if you're doing the ZR attacks in the air, and then you can follow those into his standard attacks in the air, and then finish with a ZR slam back down to the ground. He stays in the air for like 8 attacks. It's a whole lot. I love that they brought in his eating animation, that you can get those temporary hearts back out. I really want to play around with the seals that increase your damage for being at a low number of hearts, and see if what kind of damage levels I can achieve by eating all the monster foods that, increase your stats, but lower your hearts. And I assume by increase your stats, I haven't played around with them too much, but I assume by increase your stats, it also increases your defense. So despite having less hearts, you have less risk of losing a whole bunch of hearts.
Well, hopefully.
And then through his ZR self-injuring attacks, you can force your hearts down to the 30% level, and then just do crazy damage from that point on, because you have his own boost to attacks, all the monster foods, and all the seals on your weapons as well. I think there can be some really fun movesets in there. Unfortunately, the Master Sword being so effective against Guardians means like you don't always want to bring the two-handed in there that often, but when you can, or when you just don't care about it and say, I'm going to kill them with this thing anyway, it's such a blast. When I got it, I thought, okay, this is going to be the Ganondorf's double blades of this game. The extremely slow, big attack weapon of this game, because it just seemed obvious. I remember using it in Breath of the Wild, and it's slow, but that spin attack was my bread and butter in Breath of the Wild. Yeah, man, I was so shocked to find out it's one of the fastest weapons in the game, or at least it feels extremely fast for how big it is. And man, it really excites me every time I get to use it. I just feel like cheering when I pull off some really awesome combat, and then manage to eat my food and have absolutely nothing, no punishment for it at all.
I think what's also interesting that I learned is if you're down to like your last couple hearts, you won't actually take the temporary damage. You can still do the unique actions, but you won't actually lose the health. So you can't kill yourself with the weapon, thankfully.
Yeah. Oh, that would be awful.
That would be awful. That would be massive risk versus reward. But
yes, speaking of inspirations, though, it seems to come from a playstyle that developed out of Fire Emblem Warriors, or at least be kind of somewhat connected to it. If you remember the character Tharja in Fire Emblem Warriors, her personal skill made it so she constantly drained her own health, but at the expense of it increased her damage by a lot. And Tharja's special attack, her Musou attack, was Nosferatu, which is a spell in Fire Emblem that sucks the health out of enemies.
Right, so
basically
she would just heal herself then.
Yeah, she would just heal it, but you'd have to keep on going. She's kind of the worst person if you just need to run across the map, because you're just going to be constantly draining health.
Yeah.
And so this kind of sacrificial playstyle was a lot of fun there, and you definitely had to get a proper build before using her, but the rewards were tremendous, and I feel like there's a lot of rewards with that two-handed style.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I do think a lot of people, once they get the Master Sword, might feel more inclined to stick with the Master Sword, especially if there's like Malice enemies or Aster. But
yeah.
I do hope people don't sleep on the two-handed weapons for Link or the spears, because I do think those are also all really fun movesets that, in my opinion, are really good options compared to Link's variety of movesets from the first Hyrule Warriors. I feel only a few of those really stood out as good.
Yeah, he had some stinkers in there.
So,
speaking of one, we'll probably talk about later. But anyway, speaking of Link's spear, I don't have too much to say on. It kind of just, I don't know. The two-handed weapon stole the show for me so much that that's one of the ones that I have practiced the least with. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on it that maybe
I think Link's spear
on.
actually reminds me a lot of Impa's Naginata from the first Hyrule Warriors.
Oh, really?
It has a lot of the kind of the spinning and the range, but I think Link moves a lot more, because I remember the one thing that kept making me not want to use Impa's Naginata in the first Hyrule Warriors was how much she would end up standing still with it to do like a magic attack nearby, or she would throw it to do a magic attack, whereas Link is pretty much always moving with it. Even when he throws it, he like follows it like Ganon's trident.
Yeah, I feel like the ZR, the unique attack of Link's spear, is a callback not to Impa's Naginata, but actually to her Great Blade.
Yeah.
When you just do the single heavy attack, she'd zoom to the enemy in front of her.
Yep.
And it really wasn't very a useful attack, but this one obviously is built into the playstyle, so it seems like a much better. I don't actually get that many Naginata vibes. Simply because doing so much guide videos, The Naginata had some really weird attack timings in it, where it's like her third or fourth attack was just a slight spin of her hands before some other more dramatic action that's a lot easier to read. And so even when I was trying to record the footage, it would be like a crapshoot. I'd be like 50-50 whether I hit a certain one of her heavy attacks when I'm trying to demonstrate what it does. There is a mechanic from the Naginata that I think is in another character, which would be Zelda's Sheikah Slate, which I'm sure we'll get to in a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think the only other thing I would say about Link's Spear is that also feels like one of the faster movesets in the game that strings together really nicely, but can also make it difficult to do the right combo that you're trying to do if you're basing it off of animations rather than how many times you press the buttons. Which I know a lot of people do. Yeah, so...
Because I just smashed the button.
Yeah, especially if you're going off animations. I found Link with the Spear, it is at times hard to get the right one you're looking for. Because he moves so fast with it.
Yeah, there's... I usually don't... I just kind of count attacks in my head. I'll go like 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I'll press it. I never have cared about it except for 2 instances in Warriors games. One of them is... Do you remember Warriors of Troy?
I've heard of that one.
You ever heard of that game?
I think you've talked with me about that one before.
I spotlighted it on Warriors Dojo once, and that actually has a mechanic where if you press the attack button the right number of times and at the right times, it does more damage. So like Achilles swings his sword and there's like a slight flash somewhere, and if you press that button, the next attack button for the second attack, it does more damage and has more reach. That was actually a very good mechanic a very good mechanic in a very bad game. Well, it's a mediocre game. It's about as blah as games get. The other one was in Persona 5 Scramble, where the character Sophie uses these yo-yos that when you hit the buttons at the right time, your attack buttons at the right time, they start to glow, and they have 2 levels of glow, and that glow eventually fades out unless you're hitting the buttons at the right time. So you gotta get really used to her attack speed, but if you do, you get increased damage by a lot, and so that made it actually worth it. And she was one of the harder characters to learn, but really fun to use then. I'm probably gonna mention a lot of Persona 5 Scramble because there's a lot of stuff, a lot of ideas in there, and so I haven't like covered in detail on Warriors Dojo yet because it's not out in the West. I figure I might as well wait. I actually have all my guides for those games written. The game was never announced when it was going to be localized, so I'm still waiting.
Hopefully soon. But yeah, I think at this point, half an hour into the video, people are caught on that. This is going to be drawing lots of comparisons to other Warriors games, which I was part of the intent. Hence, this is basically a discussion with the Warriors Pro. So
I have gameplay footage of all those characters. So if you want to see what Sophie plays like, you can go to Warriors Dojo and look at that. That game probably has my favorite movesets of any Warriors game, which rightfully so, because there's only 9 and they're all fantastic. Whereas
it would be disappointing if they weren't, if there's only 9 of them.
I like to call Persona 5 Scramble my favorite Kingdom Hearts game, just because it feels so much like that when you're playing it. You're running around, jumping into battles, platforming, fighting super bosses. If you do the right kind of combos, you can just be in the air forever. And that's a big part of one of the boss fights. I was talking to Nantenjex about this on stream, how one of the bosses has an attack where they basically just destroy the floor for an extended amount of time. You got to keep flying around, and I wish Age of Calamity hit that level of combat, but it's not quite there. But that's because it's kind of different. Like I said, that's more Kingdom Hearts action platformer. Whereas this one is more direct Warriors title.
I think that's fair. Though that does make me want to point out the fact that I'm so glad that Age of Calamity actually has aerial combat as opposed to the original Hyrule Warriors, where it was fake aerial combat, because you'll jump in the air and be doing an attack in the air, but God forbid the little bokoblin on the ground does a little spin attack and hits you out of your animation, bringing you back down to the ground. Because your hitbox was still down there.
Yeah, you just have to imagine, like, okay, Link is in the air right now. if I just draw an invisible line directly down from the middle of his body, that's where my character actually is. That's where my hitbox is.
Yep. That's not the case in Age of Calamity, which is great.
Yeah, well, there is one character that I have to think about that all the time. Maybe not because of hitbox, but just to remember, like, where the hell I am. And that's Teba. Some of his attacks, like, where the
Yeah.
I know they're not modeling all this, so where is he actually?
He goes crazy, and I'm actually looking forward to talking about him when we get down there.
Yeah,
but we have only talked about Link so far, so we might want to come back to going down.
Well, you know what the
to
next one is? A very exciting moveset. Impa.
It's true, Impa.
Oh my
Impa's
god.
fantastic.
I might be convinced that Impa is the best character in this game because the things that she can do better than anyone. She's great in groups. She destroys crowds, and on one-on-ones, she is incredibly good. Her stasis, she can cancel out of that if she wants to. Unlike, say, Daruk, who when he does stasis, he is frozen in place. He absolutely cannot cancel out of it, which is a big shame. But Impa can. Her Cryonis is super fast, so you don't have to worry about the timing so much. And her seals are very, very easy to get. If there's just 3 Bokoblins, ZR, 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 and then any combo. Usually it's just YYX, and you'll have all 3 back up. And then when you have all 3, her special attack power is enhanced by a lot. And you can, if you have special attack and you don't have her clones out, then you can ZR, 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 special attack, and get them all instantly. So you're trading off the damage. And even if you don't have special attack, when you get all her clones, the number of attacks, you build it up crazy fast. And because she has so many numbers of attacks, she also break weak points faster than almost anyone. There's some special combos that you have to do, but with Impa, you just press Y, 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 Y. Like, you don't even have to think about it. Impa is crazy.
And it's I love that her moveset, basically, as soon as her normal combo string ends, you could basically start it right back up, and it feels like this natural progression. She doesn't have, like, this finisher that she does and then goes back to it. Like, she moves so quickly. And if you just keep mashing this, I don't want to keep saying mashing, but if you keep going through just her set of Ys,
smashing.
If you just keep doing that, she'll just keep going, and it's really satisfying.
Impa's crazy. I think she might, just her kit might be the best in the game, unless I'm mistaken in some way, unless I'm missing something really big. I know that Teba has some crazy combinations. Rivali also has really good combinations, but I feel like both of those can do one thing really well that Impa can also do really well on top of all the other stuff that she does. Yeah,
I think Impa is, like, everything that she can do is either great or, like, rather good. Like, there's nothing that she does bad, which is insane, I think.
Plus, you get her super early, so, like, it's not hard to just take her and run. I mean, you get her from the first battle. Her and Link, the first 2 characters,
Just like the original Hyrule Warriors. First 2 characters are Link or Impa.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think what's really great about the way Impa plays is even from the beginning, she's good. And as you get more combo strings, like being able to get her crowd of frogs, for example. She gets even better as you go. So on one hand, she feels rather overpowered to get from the very beginning. But on the other hand, that growth of her character, like from the beginning to when you finish her off, is really great. So let's go to Zelda Sheikah Slate next, because that's an interesting one.
It took me a while to understand. Every time I would unlock new combos for her, I was like, come on, more than 3 attacks, more than 3 attacks, more than 3 attacks. But that was before I realized that her 3 attacks work against enemy special attacks.
Yep. They are the same. They work with the Sheikah runes. Yep.
Exactly. Like, if you have an enemy that's charging at you with, you gotta block it with Cryonis, just do attack, and she'll hit it. Most of the time, if you're just wailing at an enemy, you don't have to worry about them doing some big attack that you gotta get ready for, because she's just gonna break it. Unless it's a bomb, which case you can just do YX, and then you're good. Like, she can attack really, really safely. And then she could just use her Sheikah Slate abilities as much as she wants. Yep. You can have a little bomb buddy that follows you around, or not follows you around, but goes on a path that you can follow in his path of destruction. Her stasis, although not the widest hitting, I think Calamity Ganon has that, hits in a very wide area and kind of instantly hits. There's no delay to it.
Yeah.
Her magnesis is surprisingly good. Like, you can always have a projectile to go with you, and so if your enemies happen to be lined up in a straight line, just toss it, because once you lift that whatever, she just finds nails and screws in the dirt, I guess, unless there's actually something for her to grab nearby. You just have that floating over your head and can fight like normal. It lasts for quite a while, and importantly, once you use it to pick something off the ground, her ability starts recharging. You don't have to throw it off before it starts recharging again. So you can just have that ready before you even get into a fight. And her Cryonis has, her literal Cryonis, not her X attack, has so many uses. Like, you can just create a little circle and trap an enemy in there. They can't actually walk through those. You can create a wall behind you so you don't get attacked from behind, which kind of reminded me of Impa's Naginata in Hyrule Warriors 1, where you could create that wall of fire. Similar kind of usage. Or if you have an enemy that's about to expose their weak point, you can do like X, like dashing X. So she has 6 of those Cryonis blocks around her. Actually, it'd be 8. And then you can add that on top of that. So you just have all this stuff exploding as soon as a weak point appears, and that crushes weak points too.
Yeah, that's true. She has a lot of utility, and I think what's really great is the Sheikah runes in general are great at feeling like extensions to character movesets rather than just items. But I love that for Zelda, they specifically feel like more attacks. More than the item usage or unique item usage. They tie into her moveset because she doesn't get more combo strings. She gets additions onto existing combos.
It's the missing part of her attacks.
And it's really nice too. Like, it works really nicely. She's all about like trapping and setups, and that makes her kind of complicated for a lot of players, especially since she's the 3rd character you get, and she has this moveset for so long. But I think once you really figure out what to do with her, it can get really satisfying to basically trap an enemy to its death. Yeah.
The weirdest thing about her, I think, is her regular heavy attack string, where you just do XXX, where she summons the ice, and then she goes up on 3 steps, and then she brings the icicle down. Apparently that can be good against like breaking an enemy that you've stasised, but even then I find it a little bit slow. I think she definitely needs some attack speed for that to be improved. But one idea that I want to use that for, because a lot of enemies have hidden weak spots that will cause them to fall. Like for a little bit ago, I was talking about hitting a Hinox in its eyeball with your bow and arrow.
Yep.
You can also hit a Lionel in its head with a bow and arrow. Or any attack that happens to hit that weak point can also bring that out. And I wonder if you're meant to kind of climb the stairs so that you can stop that midway and just have free attack against a Moblin's head or something.
Oh, that's possible.
You could just stand up there and do that, yeah.
Yeah, it puts her at higher grounds. That's possible.
Yeah, but I don't think that if that's how it's meant to be used, that's like the one attack. Like, what is this supposed to be used for? I just don't get it. Maybe it'll make sense with faster attack speed, which I think is her biggest weakness.
Hey folks, so this is the end of part 1 of our in-depth discussion on Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity with ShaneBrained. Stay tuned for part 2. But in the meantime, if you like this video, make sure to like and subscribe, and check out Shane's content. We'll link to his channels down below.